The Martha and Chris Great Space Adventure. One morning a letter fell onto the mat. The letterbox rattled and frightened the cat. The letters spelled help, and they sparkled like stars. It was from Archie the Alien, who lived up on Mars. "We must help him," said Chris with a most worried face. So they fired up their rocket and flew into space. High up in space with the Earth far below, they said to each other, "Which way should we go?" When they got to the moon, it was covered with signs, which pointed towards lots of different cheese mines. They realised that the moon was made out of cheese that was dug up by miners with the greatest of ease. It was loaded onto rockets and taken away to be delivered to Earth that very same day. They ate a cheese sandwich and asked a cheese miner if Archie had recently passed through the cheese diner. The miner thought hard and then answered no, so they asked for advice on which way they should go. They flew over Mars, and just after dawn, their rocket set down on Archie's front lawn. They knocked on his door, but Archie was gone. So they sat down and watched the bright rising sun. In the sunlight, their rocket shone red like a jewel, which made them remember that they needed some fuel. "We will find some," said Martha, "at Space Station Stan's." But Chris cried, "Oh, let's go home. We've done all that we can." As they reached Stan's fuel station, they heard whiz, bang, and then pop. And they saw that their rocket had finally stopped. So it looked like their space travels had come to an end. They would have to go home. They couldn't look for their friend. Then 20 small spaceships flew in to refuel. They were pupils at Stan's UFO flying school. The excitement was clear to see on each face because today they were competing in the Great Galaxy Race. Stan showed Chris and Martha his fastest UFO and said that it would take them home if they still wanted to go. But if they went to the race, maybe they'd see Archie there too. So they thought about it carefully before deciding what to do. As they moved through the darkness, Chris pointed in awe as the stars began lighting, and the next thing they saw was a man on a ladder floating here and then there while checking the stars with the greatest of care. He stopped by the ones that were dull and not bright, while his ladder wobbled wildly to the left and to the right. Tied to the ladder with a long piece of string was a box full of light bulbs he'd needed to bring. The man shouted to Martha, "Please pass me a light." Then he screwed in the bulb and the stars shone so bright. He thanked them both kindly and said that his job was to keep the stars shining. He was called Odd Job Bob. He was fixing star light bulbs throughout outer space to light up the track for the Great Galaxy Race. While Martha and Chris were floating through space, they heard beautiful music that made their hearts race. At first they heard sounds of bells that were ringing. No, it wasn't bells ringing, it was a fairy choir singing. Or was it waterfalls splashing? Or ocean waves crashing? Then they saw a star city made of bubbles and bells, where dream fairies live, casting musical spells that give all sleeping children such wonderful dreams of swimming with turtles and surfing sunbeams. But dream bubbles move with a bounce and a leap, and one hit our explorers and sent them to sleep. In a dreamlike state, they whirled and they swirled. Then at last they woke up in a different world. They woke from their sleep with their heads in a spin. They were riding the whirlwind of Saturn's magical ring. Round and round the planet they spun, on a swirling gold dust cloud so exciting and fun. They laughed as the dust swirls made shapes so enchanting, like 3 mermaids dancing and unicorns prancing, and shooting stars looped as green dragons swooped, then flew up so high and waved them goodbye. They spun very fast until Chris shouted, "Jump!" And they leapt to the planet, which they hit with a bump. They found the wise wizard, who was trying to fix his robot co-pilot, which was standing on bricks. He asked, "Can you help me?" with a sad, frowning face, as he needed it to enter the great galaxy race. Martha thought, if we help him to mend his robot co-pilot, he might help us find our friend. The starting line of the great race was a sight to behold. There were big ships and small ships, the brave and the bold. From every star system, the competitors arrived to win the gold trophy for which they all strived. From the middle of the crowd, Martha and Chris heard a shout. It was Archie, who was waving at them and jumping about. Chris ran to him, grabbing the note from Martha's pocket, shouting, "What help do you need? We rushed here in our rocket." Then an embarrassed red blush covered Archie's whole face. He said, "I just needed help to choose a ship for the race. They're all my favourites and I can't decide, you see." Then Martha and Chris both laughed. "Oh, silly Archie." Then suddenly they heard the bang of the racer's starting gun. The great galaxy race had finally begun. The wise wizard, his robot, and space station Stan sped off on the track, and Martha and Chris ran towards Archie's spaceship, and together they chased all the other contestants on the star track through space. They sped round the track and around the Star Bear, and they rode the Big Dipper. It was a starlit funfair. They drove through a wormhole, a dark, scary tunnel, and they spun round so fast that their heads were a muddle. The whole race was filled with great laughter and fun. But who do you think eventually won? They flew back to Earth in Stan's best UFO. He always used this one when he had far to go. Over mountains and oceans it twisted and turned, and it whizzed and it fizzed as the Martian fuel burned. UFOs are invisible to us here on the ground, so we hardly ever see them or hear their whirring sound. And that night at home, they looked up at the stars, and they saw one shoot over. It was Archie from Mars. He was showing off, waving to his friends down below, flying his star-shaped rocket and giving them a show. Chris and Martha laughed loudly and couldn't wait to play in their next great big adventure, which was not so far away.